You ate something wrong last night. You do not know exactly what it was. Maybe it was the chicken. Maybe it was something that had been in the refrigerator slightly too long. Maybe it was a combination of things that individually would have been fine. But at 2 in the morning, you are very aware that something is happening inside your body that your body does not approve of. And within the next few hours, you will do a series of things automatically. You will drink water. You will avoid food. You will lie very still because moving makes it worse. You will probably take something, an antacid, an electrolyte drink, possibly a medication that your grandparents could not have named, but that you have in the cabinet without thinking much about it. And if it gets bad enough, you will go to a clinic where a person with 12 years of medical training will tell you to drink water and rest. You will be fine within 48 hours. Now, remove everything I just described. Remove the refrigerator that kept everything else from spoiling. Remove the medication in the cabinet. Remove the clinic. Remove the germ theory of disease, the knowledge that invisible microorganisms are responsible for what is happening to you. Remove the electrolyte drink. Remove the clean running water. Put yourself in a forest 100,000 years ago. You ate something wrong. You do not know what bacteria is. You do not know what a toxin is. You do not know what is happening to you or why. All you know is that your body is trying very urgently to expel something, and that if it fails, you will die. What do you do? The answer is more sophisticated than you might expect, and it tells us something remarkable about the relationship between the human body, the human mind, and the natural world long before any of us knew what medicine was. Before we talk about what ancient humans did, we need to talk about what ancient human bodies already knew how to do. Because the first line of defense against food poisoning was never external. It was biological, and it was extraordinarily well designed. Vomiting is not a malfunction. It is one of the most precisely engineered responses in the human body. A coordinated cascade involving the brainstem, the vagus nerve, the gastrointestinal tract, and a specific chemoreceptor zone in the brain called the area postrema, which sits outside the blood-brain barrier specifically so it can sample the blood for toxins and trigger expulsion before those toxins reach the brain. The body detects the problem, identifies it as something that needs to leave, and initiates a process that will remove it as efficiently as possible. This system was not invented by medicine. It evolved over millions of years in an environment where eating the wrong thing was a constant and lethal risk. Diarrhea operates on the same principle. Fever, the body's response to infection, accelerates immune function and creates an internal environment that is hostile to many pathogens. The nausea that precedes vomiting serves as a warning system that makes the animal stop eating before the damage compounds. Ancient humans did not need to understand any of this to benefit from it. The body was already managing the crisis. What ancient humans needed to do was support that process and not interfere with it in ways that made things worse. And remarkably, the evidence suggests that is largely what they did. The first thing ancient humans almost certainly did when food made them sick was stop eating. This sounds obvious, but it represents a cognitive and behavioral response to illness that required learning, either individual learning from past experience or cultural transmission across generations. The instinct when the body is under stress is not always to rest. Sometimes it is to compensate, to seek more resources, to keep moving. The understanding that illness required withdrawal from food, from exertion, from the demands of the group was a piece of medical knowledge, even if no one would have called it that. Water was the second response. There is ethnographic evidence from hunter-gatherer societies studied in the 20th century that sick individuals were consistently moved toward water sources, rivers, springs, pools. The association between water and recovery from gastrointestinal illness is so consistent across cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years that it almost certainly reflects a very ancient behavioral pattern. The body loses fluid rapidly when sick. Moving toward water was the correct response, and ancient humans appear to have learned it. Then there were plants. This is where the story becomes genuinely remarkable. Across dozens of indigenous and traditional cultures studied by ethnobotanists, there are consistent patterns of plant use for gastrointestinal illness that predate any formal medical system. Charcoal from specific burned woods consumed in small amounts to bind toxins in the gut. Clay and specific soils eaten to coat the stomach lining and slow the absorption of poisons. Bitter plants with documented antimicrobial properties used in preparations that resemble, in function if not in understanding, modern treatments for bacterial infection. The Yanomami in the Amazon, the San in southern Africa, Aboriginal Australians, indigenous groups across the Americas and Asia, independently separated by oceans and millennia, arriving at remarkably similar solutions. Activated charcoal, which is now a standard clinical treatment for certain types of poisoning, was being used in some form by cultures that had no contact with each other and no shared knowledge system. They did not know why it worked, but they knew that it did. The deeper question is how ancient humans knew which plants to use in the first place. Part of the answer is observation. Animals self-medicate. This is documented across dozens of species. Chimpanzees consuming specific plant materials when infected with parasites. Elephants seeking out certain clays during pregnancy. Dogs eating grass when their stomachs are disturbed. Ancient humans, who spent their entire lives in close observation of the natural world, would have had ample opportunity to observe this behavior and draw conclusions from it. Part of the answer is trial and error across generations. A plant that helped one person recover from illness would be remembered and transmitted. A plant that made things worse would be avoided. Over thousands of years, this accumulation of empirical knowledge, tested against the reality of illness and survival, produced a pharmacopoeia that was sophisticated precisely because it had been filtered through generations of actual outcomes. And part of the answer may be the body itself. Research by anthropologist Paul Rosen and others has documented what is sometimes called the medicine effect, the tendency of sick animals, including humans, to develop specific cravings for substances that address their illness. Pregnant women crave specific foods that correct nutritional deficiencies. People with iron deficiencies sometimes crave red meat or specific mineral-rich substances. There is preliminary evidence that nauseous humans and animals are specifically drawn to bitter compounds, which are disproportionately represented among plants with genuine antimicrobial properties. The body, on this hypothesis, was not just fighting the illness, it was also communicating through craving and aversion some information about what it needed. And ancient humans, who had not yet learned to override those signals with processed food and manufactured flavor, may have been significantly better at reading them than we are. There is a version of prehistory in which ancient humans were simply victims of the natural world, at the mercy of every pathogen, every toxin, every contaminated water source, with no tools to respond and no understanding of what was happening to them. That version is wrong. Ancient humans had a body that had been refined by millions of years of evolution to detect, respond to, and survive exactly this kind of threat. They had accumulated across generations of observation and survival a detailed empirical knowledge of the natural world that included effective responses to illness. They had social structures that supported sick individuals, moving them toward water, bringing them food when they could eat, keeping them warm, staying close. They did not have germ theory. They did not have antibiotics. They did not have the accumulated knowledge of 10,000 years of formal medicine. But they had something that we are only beginning to properly appreciate, an intimate, lifelong relationship with the natural world that gave them access to solutions we later had to rediscover through clinical trials and laboratory analysis. The clay they ate to settle their stomachs is kaolin, still used in some antidiarrheal medications today. The charcoal they consumed to bind toxins is activated charcoal, a standard treatment in modern emergency medicine. The bitter plants they reached for when their digestion failed contained compounds that are now being studied for their antimicrobial and antiparasitic properties. They did not know what they knew, but they knew it. And the next time you reach for something in the medicine cabinet at 2 in the morning, it is worth remembering that somewhere in the very long chain of knowledge that produced that moment, there was a person in a forest 10,000 years ago who was sick and frightened and reached for the right plant anyway, and survived.